Hey, what's up, YouTube? It's your boy Rojo from a Convicts perspective.
It's your boy Flacco.
And today we're going to talk about the two different divisions right now of the NF. What we have is one being the original state division, and what we have is two, which is the federal. And that this all started basically, well, 100% because of the Black Widow indictments back in. What year did they start investigating that?
They started investigating basically like three to 4 years actually before that. I heard.
Yeah, so it was probably well, because okay, they came and messed with me at Santa Rita, and I want to say it was '99, so it was already well into the investigation in '99. So I was '97, '98, I would guess.
The feds were investigating them for years. Every time they do a federal indictment, it takes years for them to put it together.
Yeah,
They put all the pieces to the puzzle, right? I think originally it started out here, and actually I think Northern Cali in a small town called Santa Rosa.
yeah, yeah.
There was an individual that decided to flip and open up more doors, and they started investigating more people. And that ended up leading to Ashley, Daniel Hernandez.
Yeah, yeah. I actually was involved in that too, man. That's what started the end of my career as a member of that organization. I'll give you a brief rundown of that. I've touched on it before, but real briefly, I had got out of Pelican Bay in 1996, and it was right after I had got inducted into the organization. Well, unbeknownst to me, the FBI and SSU had a 24-hour surveillance on me. So they were on me everywhere I went, and I guess they were using those little microphones like you see on TV, like they call them Whisper 2000s or something like that, for trying to record conversations, when I was outdoors and whatnot. But they were following me around and trying to catch me up doing stuff and implementing whatever I was trying to do throughout the community. And fortunately, man, I didn't make too many mistakes. So I was able to not really have too much to offer them to assist them. You know what I mean? Like, and they're arresting me. You know what I'm saying? So the Black Widow thing, man, that was a major crippling blow to the NF leadership, because ultimately, due to people like Lizard and you know many other people, I'm sure, and good investigations on their behalf as well, it caused a lot of the NF, almost the entire NF leadership, to be found guilty federally, have their life sentences in California State Department of Corrections commuted by the governor, which then allowed them to transfer them to federal prisons. And while some of them were somehow able to hit main lines within the federal system, a lot of them got sent to ADX in Florence, Colorado, which is, the nation's version of Pelican Bay.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the Operation Black Widow is I was out there pre Black Widow, right, and post Black Widow, so I caught a little bit of bits and pieces of the information. Ironically, when I paroled from Corcoran, right, I was being schooled in there by Carlitos Terrazas from Sajo, who was the RC at Corcoran at that time. And you had another Cat 3 member who was Jimmy Wino Zarowski, who he was supposed to parole to the streets and take over the whole streets. And Ashley was basically filling in that position for Wino until Wino stepped out. So when I got out in 2000 or whatever it was, I was communicating with Carlitos. I was on probation. And so I had a certain code to communicate with Carlitos. Once everything went through the whole process of me being out there in the street and I was established and I felt comfortable to plug in with the regiment. So I ended up sending my number in to Carlitos. And I say within, I don't know, 7 days, 2 weeks, next thing you know, I get a call from Daniel Hernandez Ashley. And it was from I think an 805 area code Lone Park number and everything. So probably was a federal phone at that time. And we chopped it up and he's asking me, what type of activities can I engage in? And at that time, a lot of people were buying that BC bud at that time. Right? They were getting it by the pounds, And I knew a lot of people in my hood were generating money that way. So I told them, that was a thing that I could possibly move as well as other things. And he goes, okay, I'm going to plug you in with a brother named Chico Rose. He goes, but I'm going to tell you this direct. He gave me this clear directive. He said, no one can give you the green light to do anything out there on the streets except for me and one other person, and you know who that is. and he was talking about Jimmy Wino Zarowski. He says, if you have any issues at all with Chico, you just report to me. So I was able to sit there and function with Chico. Goose from San Juan just got locked up. And next thing you know, I'm at Chico's house. And he keeps on looking out the window, all paranoid and stuff, And he wasn't on no drugs or nothing. He used to smoke a lot of weed. And we used to go out and party and drink and stuff and, do the things that we did. And,
He was paranoid on the 6 yard, man. I used to watch him look around a lot, like somebody was sneaking up on him. You know what I mean?
So he pulls out this FBI card and he goes, man, the FBI came at me. And he goes, there's a bunch of indictments coming down. You may want to help yourself. Right? And I'm like, what the hell's going on? And then we have a newspaper article and it has all the NF leadership all being indicted. You know what I mean? So we kept on doing our thing. And I wasn't really kept in loop of what was going on. I was just doing what I was supposed to be doing, which was moving dope, communicating. And next thing you know, Chico gets taken in. He gets indicted. So I was one of the stragglers that was left out there on the streets, and we were setting up different people to go visit all the generals that came down. They were now in Oakland County Jail at first. They weren't in Santa Rita at first.
Yeah, they were downtown.
They were downtown. Yeah. So we would send people up there once a week, sometimes twice a week, and they were giving out directives. Now, I'm blind to anything that has to do with NF laws or anything. You know what I'm saying? So we were just complying with all these directives that were coming from Skip, was basically the one that was filtering all these directives. So he was in charge of the crews in San Jose. So as time transpired, I started Wino gets out, I touched base with him, and he's making accusations towards Cuetes, and that Cuetes been, committed treason and all this stuff. And why don't all the kids want to come this way to send a missive to what was the name that they called Corny at that time?
Cinco Nueve?
No.
That was the block in general.
But it was.
I know what you're talking about. I don't remember.
It was tell them that the swollen eagle has landed.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was code word that Wino got out, and that all the kids want to plug back. So I got different directives. So I'm in the middle of this stuff, and then Wino asked me, "Well, what's up with Ashali?" And I didn't know Ashali's name was Ashali. I just knew him as Daniel. You know what I'm saying? Lizard.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So when I sent that directive in, there was a whole backlash. So that's the dude that flipped. And I'm like, why no? That's the dude that told. And so I had to communicate with all the other facilities and stuff. And so I sent some directives in. And I'm like, wow, I don't even know what's going on. I'm just following those orders. So lo and behold, what I started seeing is that I started hearing bits and pieces from other NF members like Powder. You know what I'm saying? Because Powder touched base with me too at that time. He had just got out and he was supposed to plug in with Wino and he had no resources. So I was actually dropping dope to Powder and Salinas at that time too. And he was telling me like, that basically these guys are supposed to be relinquishing power. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. According to the Constitution, they should. Yes.
Because, he's telling me there's a power struggle and he's not trying to tell me too much and stuff. And I said, well, I don't know. And what I ended up learning is that anytime through the Constitution was anytime an NF member leadership brass gets indicted, you know what I'm saying, and becomes incommunicado, the reserve generals are to fall on file.
Yeah, for the most part, that's about accurate.
You know what I'm saying? But what was going on when anybody was trying to basically submit, I heard Boxer De La Riva tried to do this. I heard even Coneo from LA or Sacramento, wherever he's from, James Perez. I heard that a lot of them were getting backlash when they were trying to assert themselves in these general positions. Because I think it was supposed to be DC, Boxer from Selma.
Yeah.
And I don't know who the third one was supposed to be on that list because I don't know if I heard from a couple C's that Conejo had got demoted before the Black Widow investigation. So, but he was asserting his position at that time. So what was going on is the feds were telling us, no, you're under us. You know what I'm saying? That we may be indicted, but we have access to the streets now, phone calls, visitors, that we're not incommunicado. So that was the main push that Brass was pushing at that time was, look, we're not incommunicado. If anything,
we have better communication.
We could still take care of business for the familia.
Right.
Whereas the Bay was trying to assert themselves. And so it was already becoming an issue of conflict. There were C's that were coming out to the streets with directives from the state, right? And they were falling in line with the feds. So it was a rough transition for like 3 or 4 years So yeah, they had people coming from all over. I don't know what was going on with the other areas as well, like Visalia or anything like that, because you know how regiments are. You're not supposed to be exposed to any of those business. But I kept on hearing little bits and pieces because people breached security.
Right. Daily. Yeah.
That there were certain bros that were like committed to the state when I
Yeah.
was going in there, but I never tipped my hand where my loyalties were at that time because all the C's that I functioned with were all from Salas and San, including everybody in the East Bay and San Fran. So everybody was falling in line with the feds, even dudes that were coming out with directives from the state. Now, at the same token, I was in Little Max with Chukogian with my whole situation when I got caught up with Huicho. So Chuko at that time had told me that Brass, and he was talking about Santa Rita at the time because they were in Rita, had already deemed Huicho no good. So I know even though Chuko was in the state, he was still acknowledging the federal system at that time. But at the same time, he told me he came back on appeal. That's the whole reason why he came back to Santa Clara County, right? And his whole purpose for coming back was to establish a line of communications with the feds because they needed to start taking over for the state. But he was doing it in a respectful fashion. Then those guys took their deals in 2004, right? And the RC at Corcoran told me, Silver goes, this is a good thing, because Silver knew I knew a lot of C's at that time that I worked hand in hand. And he said, this is a good thing. So now we can start to move forward because it was a power struggle basically at the time.
Right.
And a lot of C's, that are Cat 1s, Cat 2s, it ain't your business that's going on with brass leadership. You got to really know say so. Besides those 3 generals and the 10 captains, those are the only ones that are going to be in the know of these situations. So it depended who you were loyal to when you came out. There would be probably C's out there in the streets that we didn't even know about that were loyal to the state,
Right.
that were running their own regiments. So it had not came to light. You know what I mean? And as a bro, me young in my career, I'm caught up in the middle of this stuff. What am I supposed to do? You know what I mean? Your ex-Sally Flacco sent a missive one time. Flacco from Santa Rosa, that everything north of the Benicia Bridge is under his authority and his jurisdiction, right? We get word from Corny and them that the bay's on freeze of any of their activities on the streets.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So we send a respectful missive back that this is what we're hearing from here. You know what I mean? Like trying to cover our behind.
Yeah, that's a rough position to put manpower in.
And then they had the 5-3 filter telling us that, look, basically saying that, for those at a certain, it was basically saying that if you take a certain position in the state federal issues, once the dust settles, there's going to be swift punishment for those who don't align. We filtered that out too.
Yeah.
So we're caught in the whole cross, of this whole situation. And it got more and more confusing as years go on. I'm going to elaborate a little bit more after around 2006, what was going on. But I'm going to let you fill in a little bit right now.
Yeah, the messed up thing with that whole situation is, when there's a power struggle, it has nothing to do with your regular manpower, your Cat 1s, your Cat 2s, all that. That's strictly between, the outgoing administration and the one that's attempting, to be the incoming. A lot of people, end up getting crossed up because they're attempting to follow the instructions that their education or the Constitution has led them to believe is the correct way to operate. You know what I mean? Well, like me, I was taught that the Constitution rules above every individual, which, of course it does. And that's the same with any group, any country, whatever. The Constitution is your basic do's, don't do's, and goals, and so on. So, you got people that, I'm going to listen to what they say, or I'm going to listen to what these guys say, when in reality, your answer is in the Constitution. However, these people have overall authority over you. So it's a messed up situation if you're not, it's a messed up situation for everybody, but if you're not in the know and your direct superior is telling you to do something, you're going to do it or you're going to get deemed. Well, at the other end of the argument, if you attempt to follow the Constitution, or you listen to this individual and not the Constitution, these other people might deem you for breaking a rule that because you're supposed to know the Constitution. So, man, either way, that whole situation was a nightmare. And I understand after those gentlemen went from Santa Rita to the feds that the whole situation should have been able to be put to rest, with no more confrontations and whatever. It's like, okay, you guys are onto the feds to go establish a branch in union with the, with what operates in the state and whatnot. But it man, there's still problems to this day.
Allegedly, when all the federal faction took their deals, this is what I heard. I can't really automatically confirm, but it makes sense. The East Bay was supposed to be given to the federal faction, and from my understanding was it's because no one wanted that area because the success rate was not as successful.
Yeah, it's never been a hotbed of money. We did good when I was out there, but I mean that was only a couple years span. You know what I mean? But historically, there's Dakota, there's A Street Hayward, there's 38th. You got Pittsburgh, Richmond. I mean, a lot of them are old established hoods and all that, but they don't have the deep commitment. Whereas some of the Central Valley and Salad Bowl and Sanho and those areas have, so it's never been a money pit for these guys. So I could see it. I didn't hear that personally, but maybe I just didn't.
Yeah, and another thing though that was going on at that time. So as all these guys got sent to the feds, they were starting to get established where they were at, right? And so the state, right, was trying to take control of the streets. And I know the regiments, San Jose and Salinas, they were trying to get in contact with the Bay. Pocky hadn't got out. Who got out? Wino Ramirez got out. A couple other C's got out.
Juan Gallegos was out too.
Yeah, and the whole issue that ended up happening is in 2006, they moved all NFMA leadership, AB, and all these leaders, they started moving them to what they called the short corridor, which was D1 through D4. And what they were doing was they were impeding their communications. They were taking 2 to 3 months to get letters in, right? Barely getting any visits, and no one was paroling. So what ended up happening on the streets is lines of communication were severed, right? Things had just totally changed to where the regiments were claiming incommunicado. And it was Salinas at that time, Pocky, and all them were trying to claim incommunicado and then wanted all the regiments to report to them. But I know they tried to do this with Sanjo. I wasn't privileged to show up to that meeting, right? But I know that Sanjo Regiment, they basically weren't going to accept that. And what they did was, because they were trying to get in line with Chuco at that time, they ended up deciding to start reaching out to Skip. So they were already starting to communicate with the federal faction at that time. And that's why when you had the Operation Valley Star, if you notice, which was under the Salinas Regiment, you had people from San Fran that were getting busted, East Bay, Los Banos, Stockton, because all those C's were reporting and doing business with each other. That's the whole reason why Sanjo wasn't affected. But that's because they tried to claim incommunicado. And this kind of goes back to why they did this into hostilities, because the only way these organizations were going to be able to be successful in monitor, as far as monitoring their activities and having a control on them, they had to get back out to these main lines because they couldn't do it no longer in the Bay.
Yeah, no, it was real hard to do it when I was there, man. Mail was 3 weeks, so, you don't got no like I said earlier in the earlier episode, we didn't have the luxury like these people do nowadays with the cell phones and stuff. And they're, in the Bay, you weren't, I mean, there probably still isn't any in the Bay, but they get out to these main lines, they got cell phones. You could talk, without fear of, too many people being able to eavesdrop and record and stuff like that, unless whoever your person on the street is that you're communicating with is doing it. But, man, Pelican Bay is a hard place to run an operation, I know ADX is the same, so I even think they have more privileges in ADX because I see pictures of some of our big homies, our ex-big homies, all on the internet. They're all taking pictures together. I mean, you're not doing nothing like that in the Bay. You could forget about it. There ain't no photo ducats in the Bay. There ain't no telephone. You don't have nothing coming, So I also understand that why Pocky would have to communicate with Skip or attempt to. It's like if you're out there doing too much and somebody's not happy with what you're doing, you need to have somebody above you to co-sign for what you did. So say for example, Pocky's trying to run that, and have everybody report to him, man, that'd be a hard pill for somebody of his caliber. Don't get me wrong, he's been around a long time, that would be hard to try to explain yourself to leadership if anything ever arises in the future.
That's the thing is that I don't think he was communicating with anybody. I know Sanho, we were trying to reach out to Skip. Because at first we were trying to get
Oh, I
it.
had that backwards.
Yeah.
Okay.
At first,
My bad.
at first, I think we were trying to get at Sleepers.
Sleepers from Stockton?
Sanho.
Okay.
Lencho's co-defendant.
Esquivel?
Yep.
Man, I always thought he was from Stockton.
No, he's from Sanho.
Okay.
We're trying to communicate with him. And then we decided to, I was told specifically, word for word, that we were reaching out to Skip. We were getting in line with the feds. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
So all that was like a first stage of conflict. That's why if you look at the indictments at that time, no one from Sanho got touched.
And who was pushing that?
To reach out to
Skip?
All of them. Everybody.
Yeah, I mean...
Because there was no contact with the Bay. I mean, they were communicating with Chuco for a while.
I would have done the same thing.
But there was no line of communication. If Salinas is going to claim incommunicado, we wanted to cover ourselves. They wanted Sanjo to report to them too.
Oh, of course.
You know
Yeah,
I mean?
of course.
There's a story I heard from another brother that they actually went in there, you know what I mean, to the tattoo shop after a couple people got caught up and went in there and told them that they were going to get in line with Salinas. You know what I'm saying? And this is after a few C's were out there already locked up at the time. This was like 2007 or 8, I believe. Powder and them. You know what I mean? Because I know the two soldados that were told to post up, and if anybody had an issue, they were told to start shooting. And that was Nick Nunez and that was Gonzo from Livermore. Nick Nunez from Hayward and Gonzo. They were the soldiers that were posted out. Powder told them, hey, if there's any issues, you just start shooting. So they were out there trying to regulate and trying to get everybody to plug in with them. And historically, we already know that's a big no-no. So ever since then, they've been... I think the big change where the conflict got even bigger, though, is when Happy and them got out. Happy and Bird and all them, they got indicted as well. They just started establishing their own regiments, and they were going into different areas. You know what I mean? Bird got busted out there in up towards Susanville. You know, conducting activities over there.
Him and Happy were both allowed to go to regular federal prisons. They didn't have to go to Supermax, correct?
I really honestly don't know. But
For some reason, I don't think... See, because I know Skip and a lot of those guys, they got to go to like regular general population federal facilities. You know, I know Tibbs and Corny and Pinky, they went immediately to ADX. But for some reason, I think there was multiple members of that whole wave of indictments that for some reason they shot them to other places, maybe to keep their numbers low. But I mean, all that does is allow you to get bigger.
Yeah. But these C's were able to assert themselves in control at these facilities, especially.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
They were, you know, Happy's a straight killer. I mean, Bird is too. You know, so when they were
obviously
when they were in Santa Rita, you know what I mean. No one was questioning their authority while they were there, but they were kind of just going off on their own business. You know what I mean? Their communications were with Mad Dog from Stockton. That's how he got indicted, because he was their channel.
Cervantes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Andrew Cervantes. And so since then, I mean, I think what came to fold is that they were really trying to assert themselves. I think the state really got offended with their activities out there in the street, because they weren't just putting their nose in issues that were just in the East Bay or places like that. They were putting their nose in issues in San Jose, all these different regiments, and they were trying to get them to fall in line other than them while they were out there. So there was already that power struggle. You know, you hear on Boxer's channel the Skip talking on that wiretap. You know, he's talking straight up. You know, a couple people said they didn't know what he was saying. I'm like, man, he's telling them that they have to get in line with them.
Yeah.
The family's here. So you could already see that struggle has been going on for a long, long time. You know, it doesn't take a rocket scientist just to hear all the tapes and hear the stories and see all these activities to realize that there's a few going on. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we're not talking something above our pay grade. It's all out there on Front Street.
So what we're seeing right now is, you know, each faction seems to have a green light on each other at this time. You know, if any federal, you know, inline people fall into the state, they're gonna take off on them, and vice versa, which is a shame, because it's all the same thing and they should all be able to coexist. Not that I promote any kind of gang activities to begin with or anything, but I mean, these guys all came up together. You know, there's no reason. It's two whole separate things now, you know, where that shouldn't be the case. They should all be able to get along and coincide. And there's a lot of people that are in a bad position just because of things that they can't control.
You know, and I think after they all got kicked out from the shoe and the end of hostilities, that just drew like insult to injury. You know what I'm saying? But if people think that just this peace treaty, I mean, aka end the hostilities. Is the issue why there's a conflict? No, it's a power struggle. It was going on before. This just is something that they're trying to use against the state. I believe this is just from my personal perspective. You know what I'm saying? The feds are going to try to do anything to get everybody back in line. They're relentless. They want control. They've had it forever, and they want to continue to maintain it. And so that's when you started seeing all these issues. And allegedly, this is information that's came from like numerous sources, right? That are very, very credible that I've spoken to. And they say that Baby Joker, right? Oscar Cabrera from Watsonville, and Matt Rocha, who probably should have been put in the general position right after all this happened. He had enough time and been a solid C for years. They were hit because they were in a ploy, right, to move on the state generals on the mainlands. And I've heard there was a couple melees when these situations arised, right? I heard Chente Garcia from Salinas. I heard he got removed in Santa Rita. They hit him, but they didn't really hit him that good. Same thing. And I've heard anytime anybody's came into any of these facilities, right, and they say anything about two different NFs or federal faction, they're being moved on.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, man. I knew when they moved them original guys that things were going to get bad because I mean they had been in the position to run the organization for years, and they ran it a certain way, and the people under them were in line with what they thought. And so by taking the whole core of that decades worth of leadership, man, it put the whole group in a bad position because a lot of people were getting a lot of responsibility that they didn't necessarily were trained for, have the experience for. And man, I mean, a lot of those guys have been around a while. Like DC's been around for days, but I mean, he's never been responsible for like the entire group, man. So there would be some growing pains anyway, even without the whole back and forth between two supposed different factions. I mean, it's not ever good when your own organization is crumbling from within.
It's kind of understandable though, because it's like you got to look at the federal idea of this. They've been committed to this organization for years too, right? So you think they want to relinquish their responsibilities? They committed themselves to this, so of course they want to maintain some type of involvement.
Do you think them guys, if they didn't go to the feds, would be out there on the main lines with these guys, or do you think they would have stopped that?
That's the thing.
That's a hard one, huh?
Maybe they would. I think they're mad that they're not.
I think that they're mad that they're not too, because they could be out there on the cell phones getting visits, getting them big packages and telling people what to do. You know what I'm saying? Like instead they're sitting in Florence Supermax, which is like Pelican Bay on steroids.
I'm not as informative on the Constitution like you and Boxer and all other C's, right? But from my understanding, technically, the state should have asserted themselves after these indictments
immediately. Yeah,
you know what I mean. Yeah. That's the whole thing. But it's a catch-22 situation. Here are these individuals that have been leaders in this organization for years, and you've never seen an indictment that was so crippling as this one. You've had situations where one got indicted here, and some of the street people got indicted, and but never where you have the whole mess indicted.
Yeah, it was devastating.
And several of the captains, and so where do you go from here? So it's basically been a whole political campaign up there. But like I said, unless you're in the know of the situation, I was never really. I got details of it. I heard different pieces of it, but at the same token, it was above my pay grade. I just fell in file. I asked myself if I would have went to the state, what would have happened at that time. I didn't even want to go to Pelican Bay at that time because I didn't want to get into any conflict because I knew what was going on. So when I ended up in Corcoran, I was happy.
Yeah, you could have two different homies in the same pod in the same block trying to pull you in a different direction in a situation like that.
I didn't want to get caught up in the middle. I didn't want to get crossed up. You know what I mean? And that's just this whole scenario is like for everybody out there. I heard there's been new directives coming out that anybody coming from the feds is supposed to get hit. Active homie. You know what I mean? I don't know how true this is. This is just what I heard from someone that talks to someone who's active.
Right.
And that there's also been a couple shootings of homies that got off from the feds that got hit on the streets. So I don't know where it's going. I do know that they've had certain individuals from the feds recently get out. That's going to get interesting.
Right. Yeah, I think I think that So basically, man, what I see is I see the feds being able to grow all across the country, and continue to move around in California despite a little bit of opposition from the state. But the state's always going to be where the power's at. It took a long time for them to reestablish that back just because of such a major loss of a lot of extremely high-ranking and intelligent individuals. It took them a long time to recuperate from that. But right now, I see the feds growing nationwide. They're gonna focus on recruiting in other states and being able to network back and forth with other states. They're gonna spread like a plague.
What's going to happen if any of these state generals and stuff end up getting locked up in the feds?
Man, that's such a larger system, man. Man, if they have some power there, if they're hitting their guys here, their guys are gonna get hit there. It's gonna be a it's gonna be a battle. They're not just gonna lay down and be like, okay, you hit our guys, but since you guys are with Pelican Bay, we're not gonna hit you. Man, them dudes in Colorado aren't playing, bro.
See, this is a message for all the youngsters out there and all the young Northerners and Norteños. Do you really want to be part of something that you don't know what direction it's going or who you're following is right when all you're doing is being used as a toy in this game?
Yeah, that's our that's our spin on it. There's no future in it any way you look at it, whether it's from the opposition, whether it's from your own people, whether it's from law enforcement, man, it's a dead end.
That's our take on this. Have a good night.
Right on YouTube.